Welcome to the Grow Renaissance podcast. Let's nourish the world.
All right. Welcome back to Pasture Primetime, a Grow Renaissance podcast series where we share one story at a time from the front lines of farming, food, and the future. Today's guest hails all the way from Europe, James Hague. James spent over a decade in dairy research in the UK government in Kinshasa, I should say, studying everything from ruminant nutrient to grass varieties. He went on to create an award-winning dairy processing and delivery business, and later developed Tracker, an online milk prediction and monitoring tool now used by many farmers across New Zealand, Australia, and the UK. James is driven by one goal: advancing dairy farming with smarter techniques, better knowledge, and more profitable outcomes. James, it's a great pleasure to have you on the podcast today. And as we dive into our conversations, I thought maybe I'd open up and have you share a little bit of your journey on how you got to where you are today, and specifically, why dairy?
Yeah, firstly, thank you very much for inviting me on. It was a great privilege to be on. I guess my journey born on a dairy farm. So farming families up in Yorkshire in the north of England. So it's in the blood, really. And I could have gone one of two ways. I could have either stayed in ag or gone down the engineering path.
Right.
And the thing with ag is you get to do everything. It's got a bit of everything into it, so it's far more exciting. Yeah.
Brilliant. Well, I know I was actually listening to some of your conversations you've had recently in some different communications, and a little thing called the Ripple that you just put out. I think on LinkedIn is where I saw it.
Yeah.
And I was very fascinated about, livestock behavior. I come from a background in cattle as well, though more on the beef side than the dairy side. Maybe you could share with our audience a little bit about why it's so important to pay attention to some of those behavioral components in dairy cows. I think for those of us not in the dairy industry, and you might attest to this, a cow is a cow to a lot of consumers and even a lot of agriculturalists. And so how do we distinguish behaviors in dairy cows, and what's important to pay attention to?
Yeah, and I guess there's two bits to that as well. So there's the behavior of the cow, and there's the behavior of the people that are looking after the cows.
Mm-hmm. Good.
I think the cow's probably the easy bit. So like a lot of the messaging I do is I try and come from a slightly different angle.
Mm-hmm.
Because a lot of people have been in farming for a long time. They've been farming for maybe 30 years, but there are some farmers who've been farming for 1 year 30 times.
Right.
So they don't change, they don't evolve.
Yeah.
I'm more interested in the ones that want to kind of change all the time and better understand how the dairy cow works. So when it comes to the cow's behavior, I think we've got to think of it almost like a process.
Mm-hmm.
She's got to get so much dry matter into her in a day.
Mm-hmm.
Therefore, you've got to make sure that it's available, it's fresh, it's in a form that she wants it. So I guess a lot of what I do is harking back to that split between me being an engineer or a farmer. I deconstruct the process.
Right.
And then think of it as different component bits and how do they all interact and work together. So I think it's about just taking the time and just thinking, well, how is this actually working? What's the understanding? Because I think knowledge is one thing, but understanding is a better thing.
Absolutely. And how much does technology play a part in the human observation or management of dairy cattle today versus 10 years ago?
Yeah, good question, because I think the thing with data now is, there's an awful lot of it. And unless it's correctly ordered and presented, then it can be just overwhelming. But if you take that data and you paint it into a picture, and that picture resonates with the person that is looking at the data,
Mm-hmm.
then it can go, it can create an aha moment. So you can go, yes, that's what's going wrong with the cows.
Right.
So I mean, a good example of that is if you look at something like I've just been doing a podcast on body condition, and you get a cow that's over conditioned, and there's only one thing that's going to happen with that over conditioned cow. She's she's not going to eat because she's you've now programmed her not to eat. So you can
Right.
almost track, okay, from this point on, that cow is going to lose weight because she can't physically eat enough. So
Right.
so the data is just it's creating, I guess like a structure of this is what that cow is going to do.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Then you use the data to say, is that actually what she's doing?
Right.
Yeah.
So observational and then predictable alliance. So a stronger lean on data feedback today than we did in the past, in terms of predictive natures and trend lines that are very much needed. Do you see technology playing a part in just the management? Has it increased? I mean, I've been into some big dairies lately, and I'm seeing turntables becoming a bigger thing in terms of the milking stations versus,
Yeah.
your parlors. Maybe you could share a little bit from what's happening in your neck of the woods.
Yeah, and I guess the thing is, as herds have got bigger,
Right.
then time pressures have become, pretty overwhelming on farm. So the amount of time that you've got to stand and think and observe. So we need systems now to be able to just not, 70 to 80% of the cows are gonna be on track. They're going to be doing their
Mm-hmm.
thing. But what we've got to do, and I think of it like a pinball machine, and you'll have to humour me in this analogy,
Yeah.
is we've got to use those little paddles just to flick the cows back into the mainstream.
Mm,
So we can identify the cows that are falling outside of mainstream and just lightly tap them back in.
yeah.
So we need the data to be able to highlight who are these cows that are on a trajectory to pop outside the mainstream. Let's get some early, prevention in place and just make sure we just keep them on track and just gently nudge them back in. If they go too far out of the mainstream, it's going to take a lot of time to deal with that cow. It's going to take a lot of money and effort, and it's not great for the cow. So we've almost failed at that point, but we can bring her back in. So the sooner we can get these signals back, and that's what technology does for us, the easier it is just to keep edging this cow back into the mainstream and stop her, drifting too far.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I'm going to go back a little bit to all the way to the genetics, because there's big conversations, certainly this side of the pond, as the beef herd sizes are shrinking in North America, and we're seeing that in Latin America as well. There's a few unfortunate diseases that are floating around that are also, adding constraint to our herds. But as it relates to dairy cow genetics and breeding, how do you see that shift happening, over the last decade or two? And do you think we're moving in the right direction? Is really where I'm going with dairy cow genetics.
Absolutely, I think we've got some great opportunities. I mean, I guess sex semen really kicked it off,
Mm-hmm.
and then it gave a great opportunity to then say, look, we can use these nominated sires, so we can do our mate programs. We can identify the best cows to breed from. We then
Mm-hmm.
pull genomic testing in. We can then fine tune down what these animals are and make sure that we get a heifer out of the best genetics.
Right.
And heifers from heifers are
Yeah.
the ultimate, really.
Yeah.
And we know that there are benefits to doing that. So it's fast tracked that whole process. And it's fast tracked it, and it's also made it more focused as well.
Mm.
Because we've got the genomics, it's like that. Which means that you've probably got 75 to 80% of the herd, who you can then focus off to go off and do beef.
Mm.
So, and it was a really big problem for the dairy industry to have all of these dairy bull calves
Yeah.
floating around that would, the carcass composition was, it was okay, but not really exactly what was needed.
Right.
They took a bit of dealing with, whereas now we can do nominated size for dairy, nominated size for beef, sex semen. We can have male sex semen too. I think when we look at the genetics within the system,
Mm-hmm.
we've now got a massive toolbox available to us. So we've got the sires, we've got sex semen, we've got genomic testing. All of those things together give us a load of empowerment to be able to identify the right cows within the herd to breed to dairy,
Mm-hmm.
to make sure that we get the type trait right, that we've got all of the cow families, the inbreeding side right, and then be able to use the rest of the herd for beef.
Right.
Sex
Yeah.
semen allows us to put heifers on heifers, which is a fantastic opportunity for fast tracking your genetics, but also getting that benefit of heifers from heifers. And then it allows us then to use even like male sex semen for the beef side if we want more bull beef or steer beef.
Yeah.
So genomics is giving us that ability to be able to identify these cow families that we want. But beef from dairy, it's showing it's surpassing, beef from beef in a lot of
Mm-hmm.
cases.
Mm-hmm.
And beef from beef is, I work with some beef farmers, and I work with quite a few in Australia.
Okay.
I love working in Australia. It's like,
Yeah.
these guys go, geez, mate, we're getting 2 kilos a day. Is there more we can do?
Yeah. Yeah.
And other beef producers around the world are going to, I'm going, look, we can do more than a kilo a day. 2.2
Yeah.
pounds. We can do it. It really can be done. Let's try finishing these animals within our lifetime.
Yeah.
It will be really good. The carbon footprint will be less.
Yeah.
And we need that feed conversion efficiency because yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. Australia is a different beast for sure when it comes to cattle. And do you see in Europe? Do you see much dairy on beef operations in terms of a mix and playing around with the epigenetics? Is that something that's taken off?
It's certainly growing,
Okay.
and to my mind, and obviously this is just my opinion, and I know some people won't agree, because the beef industry is, I'll be very polite, very traditional.
It is. I'd agree with that.
It's rather traditional. Is
Yep.
like we've been doing that since Noah took them off the boat.
Yep.
You know,
Pretty much.
and and yet there's a whole world out there who does not want that to continue.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
There are billionaires around the world who are throwing money into trying to manufacture it out of an ice cream machine, and
Yeah.
which is just craziness.
Yeah.
And so we've got to protect the industry. We've got to maintain that social license. And if we're taking 2.5 to 3 years to finish an animal, and it ends up with a carbon footprint bigger than a Boeing 747,
Yeah.
it's hardly surprising you're going to get attacked,
Yes.
by the outside world who, is not as well versed in these things. So
Yeah.
there's a great opportunity with the tools that we have at hand, the technology, the knowledge, all of these bits and pieces, to be able to finish these animals fairly short order.
Yeah, I'm actually, that's interesting you said that. I'm exploring a few different options right now, which you might be interested in post this conversation on our podcast here to follow up on. But we're looking at a program where we're finishing cattle in 18 months,
Yeah.
which is wonderful. If we can actually make that a practice or a process that economically pans out, as well as management wise stacks up to be quite efficient. I think it's going to be
Yeah.
a nice little wave to really shave off of that carbon footprint, but also reduce some of that management. And we're going to get, potentially faster rotations in the herds, and be able to pull back our population. But it is going to take us using data, as you've mentioned, to really understand those trend lines for short and simple in how we're reviewing and computating that data. Maybe on the heels of that, you could talk a little bit about Tracker, the program you've built here, and what was the brainwave behind you going into putting something together and collating all this data?
Yeah, I'm gonna if you'd indulge me for a moment, I'm going to take us back to the 1980s.
Yeah.
So you remember the 1980s when music was good.
Yes. Yeah.
There's some good music now, which are generally remakes of 80s stuff, but music was good. And
what was your favorite band in the 80s? I have to ask.
I'm a diehard Genesis fan.
Okay, fantastic.
So yeah. I especially like the older Genesis stuff. So I'm a big Peter Gabriel and Steve Hackett,
love it
kind of fan. It's that's still so big bit of prog rock.
Yeah.
But I like it. I like a bit of everything. So my Spotify playlist is mainly 80s and some very early 90s stuff.
Fantastic.
Yeah, whereas my sense of humour is definitely 1920s, I think. But back to the 80s, and the home PC was not really a thing. It was only just coming on board.
Mm-hmm.
With no internet, and you had dial-up. So you had a little box that used to squeak at you.
That's right. I remember that clearly.
Before crashing and trying several times. So I started, this is the engineer at heart with me, so I got a Commodore 64.
Mm-hmm.
And lots of people will remember the Commodore 64 of, having less memory than a pencil sharpener does now.
That's right.
Right? So it still had more than Apollo 11.
Yeah.
Yeah. But Commodore 64, it meant you could program in BASIC. So I would start making some computer programs for agriculture. Okay. So mainly like little gross margin calculators, because, that's what teenage kids do, isn't it?
Yeah, of course.
I'm not sure what the normal ones do, but that's what I did. And I enjoyed that. And, when I wasn't playing in the woods. But I got this, and this is the engineer in me, that is that deconstructing that biological process.
Mm-hmm.
And can I make sense of it in terms of it being a piece of machinery?
Okay.
So forever I've been coding, I've been making things, and I like coding because you make something.
Mm-hmm.
You end up with something. You work for it a long time and you've made something. So when I got to New Zealand, when was that? Early 2000s. I was going on farms and they're going, look, this is the production we do. I took their data and reversed engineered it, and found that the cows were getting up to a reasonable peak milk production, but then they were crashing down off that quite quickly. So engineering-wise, what the cows were doing is they were mobilizing a lot of body reserves to help them to achieve that peak. But once those reserves were gone or severely depleted, they didn't have that to fall back on yet.
Yeah.
And because dry matter intake wasn't great and it hadn't come up, and also there's a thing about spring calved cows. They don't actually calve them in the spring; they're calved in the winter.
Yes, that's right. I know that. That's 100%. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, trading standards needs to have a word, because they are winter calved, and you're in the lap of the gods on how much rainfall you're going to get. How much cold, how much sunshine, and what your grass covers have been before, and you can get on a grazing round of 35 days, and that's it. The platform's gone. Anyway, so I thought, right, I need some pictures to be able to show people what the process is doing. And I've always done milk forecasting for 30 odd years, so I built Tracker as a model just to show people. and and over one or two beers, possibly, they thought this was a good idea. So, yeah, so I built them something to show them what it could look like,
Gotcha.
and not to rely on what they did the previous year.
Right. So future forecasting for, picking up from where they are.
Yeah, and a lot of it is about the potential. So this is the potential of the cow. So let's go back to the genetics bit. The genetic potential of a cow is, let's say, 35,000 pounds of milk.
Mm-hmm.
So what's that going to be? What, 12,500 litres, if you're listening. But that cow might only be doing 25,000 pounds of milk.
Right.
So there's a gap between the genetic potential and what is actuality.
Right.
And that's the really exciting bit, because we've got all the technology within the cow, but what we're not doing is filling that gap. And if we can fill that gap, identify what the handbrakes are that are stopping us from achieving that, that's a lot of milk in the tank.
Absolutely.
That's a lot of cash.
Yeah.
That we don't need to keep as many cows, because we can do more milk with fewer cows.
Yeah.
Which then frees up the labour requirement, the capital requirements, the cash flow requirements. We get that bit right, and then we put more cows on. Yeah. So using computer programs just helps me to model very practically what is going on the farm.
Yeah, I love it.
Yeah.
I love it. And it is exciting. Picking up that delta is really exciting. 25,000 to 35,000. Any of those efficiency gains, I think, are tremendous. Once you hone in on it, and you can actually see the change happen. Maybe you can explain to the audience a little bit. I mean, in Canada, we still work on a quota system in our dairy. What's happening in Europe right now in terms of going to market with milk? Are you in a quota system? Like, what are the dairy farmers facing there in terms of milk?
Yeah, so we had a quota system, which so the whole of Europe went into quotas, and it's a mechanism that governments tend to bring in to try and manage the market.
Mm-hmm.
And governments managing markets, I mean, what could possibly go wrong? What could possibly go wrong?
Nothing.
Governments interfering with market forces.
Yeah.
What can possibly go wrong?
Yeah.
So of course, they have to appease farmers by giving them money to make up for that, and they're like. But a quota system it's an artificial barrier.
Mm-hmm.
And I love a bit of economics. I love a bit of John Smith and Maynard Keynes and all of those bits like that. And the main thing about economics is, you let market forces be market forces.
Mm-hmm.
So a quota system creates all of these artificial barriers, and it can stop a certain amount of craziness going on. But unfortunately, it's a damn wall, isn't it? Sorry, I'm not swearing there. It's a wall. It's a wall holding back this massive tide of water.
Yes.
That when you let that dam go, you're going to cause a lot of damage. So that happened to us in the UK, in Europe, in the UK, is that the quota system was removed, and it was a thing called deregulation. So the market was able to do all sorts of things, and lots of independent dairy companies clambered for the milk. So they all offered extra money for the milk, and there was a nice little golden period for a while. And then that golden period dissipated, and you end up now where you've got aligned contracts with supermarkets at the top end of the market, and farmers are getting, 5 to 10 pence a litre more than the farmers at the bottom end of that. So there's a lot of disparity within the market. So there are haves and have-nots. The haves can use that money and get bigger, and expand, and the have-nots, unfortunately. So it's become a little bit cutthroat. I think there probably should have been some more guardrails just to help, sometimes market forces do need a little bit of containment.
Absolutely, they do. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's very
Yeah.
interesting, and I'm glad you covered that, because there's some discussion again over this side of the pond about what happens post the quota system, particularly in Canada, and learning from the playbook that just took place in Europe there.
Yeah.
So we'll see what happens. We'll watch that one carefully. What?
Sorry, just on that point, Neil. It's
Yeah.
a band-aid that needs to be ripped off very quickly.
Yes, I would agree with that, and I'm
Yeah.
championing for that in Canada.
Yeah, and that happened in New Zealand as well with subsidies. So in New Zealand, they took all the subsidies away, and there was a period there where things were really, really tough. But look at New Zealand now.
Mm-hmm.
Those guys are fantastic. They've cooperated. They've taken the cooperative system that was first developed in the UK, and they own it.
Mm-hmm.
They are the best cooperative farmers in the world, I would say, in my opinion.
And they truly do own it, right? Like when we think about ownership, and I always relate this to a little bit of what we're doing at Grow, which is creating this ownership economy, utilizing a tool like the blockchain, not to lean into it, but it is where somebody actually has ownership, and we don't actually have a centralized body over top of us that is, dangling the strings, and we think we have ownership, but we really don't. And so I agree with you. I think New Zealand's done a tremendous job there, and give a lot of respect for that, both on the cattle side, but also all the way into different ruminants and some of the other farming practices that are going on there, but specifically on the cattle and dairy. So, what excites you about the dairy industry as we look into the future here from today forward? What's something that's really capturing your attention and motivating you?
I think that one of the really cool things about the dairy industry is we will never get it right.
Mm-hmm.
It is it's definitely infinity and beyond. So the potential of the dairy cow, I can't see where the limits are. I think she's got potential to do more and more. Let's go back 30 years and say, look, we can have cows doing 40,000 pounds of milk.
Yep.
You'd have ended up one of those jackets that fasten around the back.
Yes, that's right.
Wouldn't you? Whereas today we know it's a reality. And we know that we can get significantly more dry matter per hectare out of our farms. We've mastered our level of understanding of a lot of the biological factors of farming have significantly improved. So I would say the Lego blocks of our understanding, we've got a much bigger Lego set now than we've ever had before.
Yeah.
So our progress can be exponential rather than linear.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, you see a lot of not even linear growth in some areas.
Yeah.
So the exponential potential is there.
Yeah.
But we've still got this linear mindset.
Absolutely.
So let's try and break out of that and go into this exponential one, which is right. Yeah, we've got these things. So what do we do next? What next?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And you bring up a really fascinating point about what next. That I've practiced what we call regenerative agriculture for a long time. We've had some discussions around that. And I've said for quite a while that one of the hardest regenerative systems that I've ever worked in is a dairy operation, because of the complexity, particularly if it's beef and dairy, operation. The beef on dairy genetics and the epigenetics. Maybe you could share a little bit of your thoughts around what regenerative dairy looks like to you, or is that a term that's circulating in Europe and in the UK? Has that fallen by the wayside? Is that changing a little bit? What does that look like?
Yeah, I mean, regenerative it's definitely a buzzword over here, and there's a real movement for regenerative farming, which is cool. I mean, for me, for me, the word is new. What regenerative farming is not new,
Right.
because to my mind, there's a lot of common sense in regenerative farming.
Right.
And I'm very much one for looking forward, but I always look back. I always keep an eye to the past. And I'll give you an example. I went to a farm in the North Island of New Zealand. I think the government had been developing it. So in New Zealand, the government developed some farms, and then they put them into things.
Okay.
I think they spent something like, I don't know, seven or $8 million developing this farm.
Wow.
And they take it out of forestry,
Mm-hmm.
and they flipped it. They call it what they call flipping it. So they literally took everything that was on top, chopped the trees down, took everything on the top, and they bury it down 8 foot deep.
Okay.
Right?
Yeah.
And then they level it off and they hump and holler it. So I don't know if you're familiar with humping and hollering. Yeah. So because it's high rainfall area,
Right.
just hump and hollow, grade it all out, things like that. And I'm on this, let's say $8 million farm, and I'm stood there with the farm manager and one or two of the investors. And I said, so what have you done about worms? And they looked at me and go, bloody Palmer, it's, what are you on about? What do you mean worms? I said,
Right.
well, you're not really going to grow much without them.
Yeah.
Well, we are, because we're going to put all this nitrogen on. Oh dear.
Yeah.
I just, it just, you need
That's how
them.
we're educated. That's how we're educated, though, right?
Yeah, but I think if we go back to where we were back into the 60s, 70s, and 80s, there was a whole industry, almost like a nanny state of big industrials, like in the UK, one of the biggest and a fantastic company in its time, ICI Fertilizers, Empirical Chemical Industries, ICI Fertilizers, absolute behemoth. They invented a heck of a lot of stuff.
They did.
So you want prilled fertilizer, they developed prilled fertilizer. If you want tail marker paint, they invented that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because the ICI still, do paint. So, but they held, I don't know if I'm able to say this now, but they held farmers very close to a very warm bosom, and they looked after them. And everything they do, they gave them all the systems and everything that they did. All they had to do was just keep buying the fertilizer.
Yeah.
Right? Keep buying into the chemicals and keep buying into those. And everything was going well, because post-war, people needed food. The population was growing, and it was needed. But, and this is one of my favorite things that I say that very few people actually understand, but I'll keep saying it anyway, is there's a Pigouvian tax to pay. Are you familiar with the Pigouvian tax?
I am not. Please explain that.
So there was an economist, I told you I liked economists, economist called Pigou.
Pigou. Okay.
Not the cartoon character Pingu. Right? Pigou, I think I've got his name right. And he said that when we look at the balance sheet, when we look at the profit and loss of a business, then we've got a transaction that we're going to buy things, we're going to sell things.
Right.
But there's a hidden cost. And there's a hidden cost out. So let's take a plastic bag. And plastic's been fantastic. We've been able to use plastics, and it's been able to mean that we've been able to use shampoo and all sorts of bits and pieces, and not use glass. But at the end of its usefulness, you throw it in the bin.
That's right.
And somebody's got to clear it up.
Yeah.
But was the cost of that clear up ever included in its initial price? No, we got it cheap. And the whole of agriculture has had this. So we've had things that have been cheap, which we then have to pay for later on. So I think you're going to look this up afterwards, aren't you?
I am.
So a Pigouvian tax, we've got to build it in. New Zealand is going through this absolutely at the moment.
Okay.
So it was able to use nitrogen at 350 kilos a hectare,
Mm.
use irrigation, just water, nutrients. You are literally doing hydroponic farming
Yep.
on a massive scale,
Mm.
on a land bank. But that nitrate is now in the water,
That's right. And so
and
now
it's
they
going
got
to
to do
stay in the
something.
water
Yeah.
for a long time. So there was no Pigouvian tax you could put, and New Zealand needed to do it. It needed to grow its economy. It needed to get to that point, but it was doing it for very good reasons, but without enough thought on the Pigouvian tax,
Mm.
which was to pay, and it's the future generations that are going to pay.
Yeah.
And I think if, as a species, we need to be smarter and think, okay, we're doing that today, but what's the cost going to be tomorrow?
Yes.
And
That
that's
legacy
where
piece. Yeah.
yeah, and that's where regenerative is going to come in, because it's saying, hang on a minute, stop a minute. We've been through this massive learning cycle.
Mm-hmm.
One, have we learned from it?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
What have we learned from it? Chemicals are not bad. Everything is made out of chemicals.
Yeah.
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 The use of chemicals appropriately is good.
Yeah.
Using chemicals synergistically with biological processes is even better.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So I've always been very much a fan of organic farming,
Yep.
but you'd never catch me organic farming, because I want to take the best of organic farming, the best of chemical farming, and combine the two together
Right.
and make them work.
Yeah.
So I might use 50 kilos of N per hectare, but I'm going to have 25% of my pasture land, which is clover.
Right. So you got
And
the
I'm going to
nitrogen.
let that clover break down and utilize the nitrogen out of it breaking down. I'm going to make sure that I've got worms in there that are going to help break down all that leaf matter.
Yeah.
That are going to get rid of all my dung pats and take those out of the way. So I'm going to harness all that biological, infrastructure that there is
Yeah.
towards my very well-meaning aims.
Your what was the name again?
Pigouvian.
PCAX. Yes, that's it. Thank you. I'll have to write that down.
Yeah.
I love it. I love it. And I'm with you there. I have a very similar mindset, James, in terms of we can't forget about the science that got us here, in terms of the historical. And when I think about chemistry, when people say chemistry, it's a broad spectrum, just like the word regenerative. It's broad spectrum.
Yeah.
What does it actually mean, right? And I think I often wordsmith it to using the right sciences appropriately for the ecosystems that we're working in. And if we can do that, the end goal would be that the environment self-regenerates, which is what we're kind of looking for in the legacy model. But we have to think about the cycles that go into that, right? And you've brought up a few that I talk about that people forget about all the time, right? That as we're applying science, whatever that may look like for you in your ecosystem, we've got the water cycle, we've got the carbon cycle, we've got that self-generated nitrogen cycle that's happening even without our knowledge. The gases that are above the cover canopy or the soil canopy and the crop canopy as they're growing. And so how are we affecting that? What domino pieces are we stopping, or what linchpins are we pulling that we need to either be aware of or align with in terms of the applications that we have down? But I don't think it's an either or situation, and that's really the stance that I take. And I think it's much along the lines you're saying is, whether it's organic or regenerative or sustainable or conventional, they all have bits and pieces that work really well, and they all have bits and pieces that don't work so well. And so how do we just farm more effectively, knowing that we still need to get product to shelf, consumers are demanding, more nutritiously, and creating efficiencies and really one of the things that I taught, somebody asked me the other day, what's your main focus when you work with a farmer, regardless of what they're doing? I said, I start with their balance sheet. Speaking to an economist aficionado, if I understand their balance sheet and I understand what elasticity they have in that balance sheet, and then we play from there, or how do we create elasticity, then we can start to figure out what pieces, what good pieces from organic or regenerative or sustainable can fit into your current processes, so that we can find better ways to deal with pasture-based systems and higher input systems. Really finding that sweet spot for profitability, as well as in the cattle industry or in the dairy, cow well-being, the animal well-being that's taken into account for all those things that we're putting together. So very much aligned with some of that.
And that's a really good point, the balance sheet. One of the first things that I'll do on farm after they've put the kettle on and got a slice of cake out is, so I have a look at the accounts and I'll look at the balance sheet and I'll look at the P&L.
Yeah.
And I'll reverse engineer the two of them. So if that farm has got, let's say it's got $1 million worth of borrowing.
Mm-hmm.
So what's your bank interest rate at the moment?
About 7%.
7%.
Yeah.
What's the return on capital employed for a typical farm?
Good question. I don't know off the top of my head. What's it?
Less than 4%.
Okay.
So you can quite happily say that money is borrowed at twice the rate that we actually make money.
Yeah, I'd say that's a truism. Absolutely.
Yeah. I mean, the smart thing to do would be you borrow $1 and make $2, and then you can give one of the dollars back and then keep the other dollar for yourself.
Right.
But what we tend to do, a lot of the time in ag is we'll leverage on the value of the balance sheet, borrow some money, but the return on the capital that we've got employed in the business is significantly less than the money we've borrowed.
Yeah.
So what I typically do if I went on farm, and I'm not on farm as a popularity contest. I'm there to genuinely help people.
Mm-hmm.
So I'd go, right, anything that we can sell goes to pay that money back. Anything we don't need that isn't generating us money, that goes. Right?
Yeah.
We're not spending money, and this is where smart farming comes in, and talk about chemicals. Why am I spending money on fertilizer when I could get the soils and some clover to give it me for free?
Yeah, absolutely.
So let's look at those things. Let's not fight against those bits. Let's get what we can. So just re-engineer the balance sheet because it has to stack up. On the same vein, if you flip it the other way, for people that go like organic or regenerative, if they still keep that high cost structure, I can guarantee that the outcome.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Because there's going to be good years and bad years.
100%. 100%. I know where you're going with that.
Yeah, because your ability to counteract some of the events of weather and biology, etc., like that, and it takes a wee while to get a farm back up biologically active again. So, it's going to take a little bit of management. So, it has to be carefully considered. You do need a good little 5-year business plan.
Absolutely. What are your thoughts around decentralized finance? Would behoove me to ask, given that's a little bit of what I do in the Web3 space that we're integrating. Do you see it as a additive to balance sheet and the farm operations? Do you see it as something that needs more knowledge base? How prevalent is it in discussions and around what you're doing right now?
I think it's, farmers typically they're good at farming. Some are very good at business. There's a smaller minority who are good at both.
Mm-hmm. I would agree with that.
If the market prices are not supplying, listen to the screams.
Right.
But I think we've got to, and it does involve just looking at that balance sheet and going, how well is my business geared up to this.
Yeah.
So I was working with a farm the other day, and we were just looking at the asset register.
Mm-hmm.
And just looking through, like, well, what's our maintenance cost each year? You know, how much time are we spending on maintaining things? What is bought and what is leased?
Right. Yeah.
What's the most, cash efficient? Where can we get working capital back into the business?
Yeah.
And release and let money do its thing. Because all too often on farms are dreadful for this because, they hold money very tight and do not leverage it to the best result.
That's right.
They might be sat on a gearing of 80% or something, and meanwhile running old equipment.
Yeah.
So I think a lot of farms can think, well, what do I need for the next 5 years? Let's take the family silver, leverage it well without losing, putting too much at stake.
That's right. Yeah.
And let's make sure that we actually bring the cash into the business to allow us to future-proof the business going forward. So I'm a big fan of looking at any financial instrument that is going to help, the farm get into that position, and one that is listening to the market, especially.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
You go against the market at your peril.
Yeah.
Anything you can do to engage with the market and follow the market. So I'll jump on a soapbox quickly. Here in the UK and there in the States, there are farmers that if they did another 0.2 or 0.3% of milk fat or protein, they'd increase the milk price by 10 or 20%.
Yeah. Isn't it crazy? Such
And
a
it's
small
sat
ratio
there.
for such a, yeah.
Yeah, every time you walk into the kitchen table, it should be there as a little elf on the kitchen table going, you've just lost $1 million because you could have done that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I know it's boggling, really. But that's a good soapbox to be on because I think we need to vocalize that a lot more. And part of the work that we're doing at Grow, is finding these levers and looking at both the, call it in-field things that we can do to create different financial mechanics, that are going to aid the business. But also bringing in, this idea of rewarding farmers for the heavy lifting that they're doing using DeFi. And so, not having to leverage or borrow and lean into the traditional finance system. Not that we're going toe to toe with it. It's 1 + 1 = 3 really, but to your point, it really is finding just different levers to pull. So yeah, I really appreciate that. As we're getting near the end of this conversation, and I think there's been some great points that you've made, James. I'd love to hear what your thoughts are. If you could give a young dairy farmer a piece of advice, what would it be? Somebody just starting into their dairy journey.
I think it's interesting. I was looking at the stats on my podcast, and the majority of people listening are younger than the age of 35.
Oh, really? Very interesting.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, which is cool. So nearly all the references I make, it'll go straight over their heads, I think.
Yeah.
But anyway,
but that's encouraging,
though,
don't you think?
Sorry.
I mean, that's very encouraging. That we have such a younger generation interested in what's going on in farming. I'm finding in North America there's a big gap, in terms of this generational turnover, and there's a big divide between the 40 plus and then the 20 to 30, and then that gap between the 30 to 40, those that really should be getting in, we seem to be lack thereof. So I'm very encouraged to hear about those stats.
Yeah, and I think the nice thing about the younger generation is this new lot of young generation are not like the X's, because we were very much dragged down by traditionalism. You conformed or you got out. You just you farm in that same sort of vein as your forefathers did, and you're very much held back. But I think we've been able to break free from a lot of that, because things like regenerative farming, would have died a death back in the 80s and early 90s.
100%.
And in fact, they did. They did.
Yeah.
There were movements back in those times.
Yeah.
And they died a death. So, but now it's much more accepted. And I think my advice to the younger generation is, one, go back and listen to that 80s music. you really like it. Two, listen to the old folks, but then just do your own thing anyway.
Yeah.
That's
Great
information for you to take, but craft. You've got the ability to do this exponential growth.
Yeah.
If you follow the linear growth, there's no excuses for you.
Yeah.
You've got all the tools in the toolbox. You should always be wanting better.
Yeah.
And I think for the young generation, we're sat at that crossroads where we've definitely got to take the general public with us.
100%. Yeah.
Yeah. So social license, in my book, is absolutely everything.
Yeah.
Farmers are very well regarded by the general public, and it's been hard earned.
Yes.
But you should never take it for granted.
That's right.
So we should be looking for animals to live longer, more productive lives. We should be looking to make sure that we're looking after the environment. I think what's happened to the environment has not been farmers' fault. It's been a total mechanism.
Yep.
A total mechanism. And let's not put blame at anybody's door. Let's just realize where we are and what we're going to need to do moving forward.
Yeah.
But I think what would be a farmer's fault is to ignore those mechanisms that we could be using now.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And the supply chain needs to be fully on board with it. That if we're going to do that, what we can't do in the supply chain is reward the farmers for doing environmental things well at the top by just taking the money off the bottom.
Mm-hmm.
Not like one potato, two potato. They can't just take it off the bottom and put it on the top. They've actually got to extract that out of the market and take everybody up together.
Yes.
And at the minute, what I see is the companies are just taking the money off the bottom and they're sticking it at the top.
Yeah.
And all that's going to do is stop that next lot of farmers from coming up. And we'll just end up with fewer farmers. We can't have fewer farmers.
Yeah, I mean, that couldn't be more well said there, James. And I was just in Chicago. I just got back from Chicago at an event, primarily supply chain at the event. And they were speaking exactly that. It was how do we take the potatoes from the bottom, put it on top? How do we incentivize farmers to stay the course, as it were, while improving the environment? And my soapbox that I was on was, we just need a new sandbox to play in. We need to create this new sandbox that is doing something different, because that old system just isn't working well, and it won't create legacy, which is a word I use a lot. But introduction of younger generations wanting to get into farming, and what I'm a little bit afraid of is that, going back to the start of the conversation, the dollars are going to flow to try to put this all into a petri dish, and so we have an easy button that we push, and that's where our food comes from, and that scares me more than anything. And that's that system of taking, dollars from the bottom and putting it on top, because I think there's this trend going on right now where if we can do this within a confinement of a lab, we're going to improve the environment, and in turn, we'll improve the environment and we'll be able to make our food, exponentially. And you can just see the house going to crumble with that process.
Which is great if you ignore 95% of the rest of the reality of the world, which is you need cows in the world.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
The problem isn't we've got too many cows. We've got less cows now than we did before World War II, for goodness sake.
Mm-hmm.
Right? It's not cows causing the environmental problem. It's people, and people not doing the right things. So we can manage a bigger population, but we have to do the right things. And it's, from a farming point of view, if we can get more efficient, so go back to your beef. if we can shave 8 months off rearing beef,
Yeah.
that's huge.
Massive, right? Yeah.
If we can reduce the carbon footprint of milk by 50%, that's huge. We've done our bit. But what we're doing by keeping farming rather than manufacturing it in a thing is we're keeping the environment working as well. So I don't know if you ever noticed, birds quite like eating things out of cow poo.
100% I do. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. A system that's been developed for billions of years.
Yep.
And yet humans who think we're smart and we're actually not very smart at all, think you come along and make a machine to actually bypass that whole process. But we should have learned. We've been here in this last 50 years. We've been through this before. We're just going to do dumb things differently.
Yeah. Isn't that the
You
truth?
know,
Yeah.
rather than just think, actually, let's just think, how does all of this work? How does it all come together? And how can we just make sure that actually we work with it and not against it?
Yeah. On that note, I think we'll start to wrap up here. And as I often do on the podcast, I think that was a wonderful last thought there. I do want to give you the floor, though, to share about anything that's going on, with your podcast, some of the work that you're doing, things going on in your bio region that you want the audience to know about. It's your turn to have a little bit of a spotlight here and share and promote the wonderful things you're doing.
Yeah, thank you very much. I appreciate that. So I run my own dairy club, where I put, as we met, do quite a lot of posting on LinkedIn. And all my bits are about challenge, really. So it's just challenge that convention and that traditional thinking. And I'll do all sorts of bits on there. I'll use a bit of imagery. I might even write the odd poem on there just to get people thinking about things differently.
Love it.
Because it's the only way we get change.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So I do that. I've got my tracker program. So tracker I've been developing it for years. It's about, as you said at the beginning, it's about understanding the whole process around the cow. It pulls in all the data points. It adds on all the data from the mixer wagons, activity collars and bits. I'm working with a very good company called Peacock Technology in the US. They've got a system called IDS.
Mm-hmm.
And that's cool.
Okay.
We're working with some really good progressive farmers over there, pulling all their data together and creating new insights. So that's cool. I'm working with a lot of businesses here in the UK and in Europe and still in New Zealand.
Wonderful.
Just working with those producers and that want to do things differently.
Yeah.
I'm doing a little bit on beef as well, which you might be interested in. So my big take out on beef is feeding the cow for today is really important, but it's less important than feeding her yesterday. Huh. What we fed her yesterday is far more important than what we're feeding her today.
I like that.
And always bear that in mind. Her production today is based on what she ate yesterday.
Mm-hmm.
And therefore the day before and the day before. And if we've messed up back there, we're having to work a lot harder today. So keeping beef cattle on track.
Yeah.
And my other big thing is that dairy heifers are not living a long enough, more productive enough life.
That's right. We need to elongate that for sure.
Yeah, and it's the big push. Here in the UK, lifetime productivity is going down. So with all the tools we've got in the toolbox, the genetics, the genomics, the epigenetics, all the other bits and pieces, let's open the damn toolbox.
100%.
Let's start using it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I love it. And if somebody was wanting to connect with you, James, to the audience, you can always reach out to myself and I can put you in touch. But is there somewhere that they could go, website or, somewhere that they can get in touch with you directly if they're wanting to reach out?
Yeah, definitely. So LinkedIn is by far the best.
Wonderful.
The best, place to get hold of me. So if you look me up on, I think it's James.Hague1. There's a younger picture of me and a cow. I'm the one on the right. Right. So if you contact me, just join up and then DM. I'm very happy to contact. And if they want to listen to my podcast, it's called Think Outside the Herd.
Love it.
Yeah.
Love it.
So it's a cow version of the Thinker, the statue, the Thinker.
I love it.
It's not a cow sat on a commode,
Yes.
like some people might have mentioned. But yeah.
Wonderful. Wonderful, James.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much. I really appreciate you taking the time out. I look forward to staying in touch here. I'm sure we're going to have many conversations about the work that we're both doing in field. To our audience, you've heard how to get in touch with James. Again, you can always reach out to me and we can connect you. I really hope you enjoyed this conversation today, and we will catch you on the next Pasture Primetime. Have a wonderful day.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for listening to another episode of the Grow Renaissance podcast. Make sure you like, share, and subscribe this episode. Remember, it will take a community of us to do the best in the world and truly nourish not only ourselves, but the planet, the atmosphere, the soil, the plants, and the animals on it. So make sure you spread this message anywhere that you can.